The summer sun beamed down on the sparkling blue water of the community pool, where laughter and splashes filled the air. Families lounged on deck chairs, children played in the shallow end, and teenagers gathered by the diving board, soaking in the warmth of the season. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon, just another day of summer fun. But for one teenage girl, the day was about to take a sharp and unexpected turn. She had just stepped into the pool, her dark curls pulled into a high ponytail, her smile bright as she adjusted her goggles. She had been coming here for years, her strokes smooth and confident as she glided through the water. She was not a stranger. She was not out of place. Yet that did not stop the sharp voice from cutting through the peaceful afternoon. "Excuse me, what are you doing here?" The voice came from the deep end, where a middle-aged woman in a wide-brimmed sun hat stood with her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was unreadable, but her tone carried a clear message. She was not happy. A few people turned to look, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The teenager slowed her strokes, touching the pool's edge. She pulled her goggles up, blinking against the glare of the sun. "Sorry?" she asked, unsure if the woman was even talking to her. "You are not supposed to be here," the woman said, stepping closer to the edge of the pool. "This is a private community pool, and I do not think you belong." Silence crept into the air. The sound of splashing water dulled as people took notice. A few whispered among themselves, exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable, while others pretended not to see what was happening. The girl, still gripping the pool's edge, felt a strange tightness in her chest. "I am a member," she said carefully, her voice steady but firm. "I have been coming here for years," the woman scoffed, shaking her head. "That is highly unlikely," she muttered, her eyes scanning the girl as if looking for some reason to prove her wrong. "Who even let you in, Adike?" That moment, an older man who had been reading a newspaper nearby set it down and adjusted his glasses. "She is right," he said calmly. "I have seen her here before. She swims often." The woman pursed her lips but did not back down. Instead, she leaned in closer, lowering her voice but keeping it sharp. "I do not know who you think you are, but I will not let just anyone walk in and use our facilities. You need to leave." A slow anger burned inside the teenager, but she took a deep breath. She had dealt with situations like this before, people who looked at her and assumed she did not belong. But she was not going to let this woman push her around. "I am not leaving," she said, her voice calm but unwavering. "And you have no right to tell me to." The woman's face twisted, her frustration growing. "Do not get an attitude with me, young lady," she snapped. "I will have security escort you out if you do not listen." The tension around the pool thickened. People were watching, now their eyes darting between the woman and the girl. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. But no one stepped in. Then, just as the woman was about to call over a lifeguard, a voice rang out from behind her. "Is there a problem here?" The woman turned sharply, her annoyance flashing across her face. But the moment she saw who had spoken, her expression changed. The irritation faded, replaced by something else, something close to panic, because standing there, arms crossed and eyebrows raised, was a tall, well-dressed woman. And even though she was not in a suit or flanked by security, her presence alone demanded respect. The woman at the pool paled, suddenly unsure of herself. This girl, she does not belong here," she stammered. "I was just making sure." "You were just making a mistake," the newcomer interrupted smoothly, her tone firm but controlled. "Because this young lady happens to be my daughter." The silence that followed was deafening. The teenager, who had been bracing herself for another argument, suddenly felt the weight of the moment shift. People around the pool were whispering now, some even gasping. A few turned their heads, suddenly realizing who the woman was. And as recognition dawned, so did understanding. This was not just any woman. She was the governor. And the girl standing in the water, the one the woman had just tried to kick out, was her daughter. The color drained from the woman's face as she took a shaky step back. She had messed up badly. And she knew it. The woman swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of her sun hat as if it could somehow shield her from the weight of her mistake. A hush had fallen over the pool, the light-hearted summer energy drained and replaced with thick, awkward tension. People who had been lounging in chairs were now sitting up straight, watching with quiet fascination. Some whispered to each other, while others kept their eyes wide, waiting to see what would happen next. The teenage girl, still standing in the pool, felt the cool water against her skin, but inside she was burning. Not with embarrassment. No, she had done nothing wrong, but with that all-too-familiar feeling of frustration. It had happened, before, in different ways. The looks, the questions, the unspoken assumption that she did not belong. But this time was different. This time her mother had walked in at just the right moment, the woman who had just been so confident, so certain, that she had the authority to make someone leave, now looked completely lost. She opened her mouth as if to say something, then quickly shut it, eyes darting around as though searching for a way out. The governor took a slow step forward, her gaze locked onto the woman. "I am going to ask you again," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Is there a problem here?" The woman let out a nervous laugh, though it sounded forced. "Oh, no," she said quickly, shaking her head. I think there was just some confusion. I did not realize who she was." The girl clenched her jaw. She knew exactly what that meant. If she had been anyone else, if her mother had not been who she was, this woman would not have backed down. She would have kept pushing, kept insisting she leave. Her mother gave a slow nod, her expression unreadable. "Confusion?" she repeated, her tone carrying a weight that made the woman shrink back even more. "Yes," the woman said quickly, her voice too eager now, desperate to fix what had already been broken. "I just thought—" She stopped herself as if realizing that any explanation she gave would only make things worse. The governor tilted her head slightly, studying the woman for a long moment before speaking again. "Do you work here?" she asked. The woman's lips parted, but no sound came out. She looked around as if hoping someone might step in and save her. No one did. Finally, she cleared her throat. "No," she admitted, her voice much quieter now. "Then why?" The governor asked, "Did you think it was your place to tell my daughter she could not be here?" The silence that followed was unbearable. The woman shifted her weight, glancing around again, but all she saw were pairs of eyes watching her, waiting for an answer. Her confidence, which had been so strong just moments ago, was now nowhere to be found. I was just trying to make sure the rules were followed," she said weakly. The governor's lips pressed together for a moment before she let out a slow breath. "I see," she said simply. The girl, still gripping the pool's edge, could feel her mother, holding back. She had seen that look before, the way she measured her words carefully when she wanted to say something more, but knew the moment was not right. Then, just as the woman looked as though she might try to excuse herself and walk away, a voice broke through the quiet. "Excuse me, Governor." A lifeguard in a red polo and sunglasses had approached, standing cautiously at the edge of the pool deck. He looked young, maybe in his early 20s, and he had clearly witnessed the whole thing. He hesitated for a second. Before continuing, "I just wanted to say that your daughter is absolutely welcome here. She has been a member for years, and we have never had an issue." The governor turned to him, offering a small nod. "Thank you for confirming that," she said, her voice carrying an undeniable authority. The lifeguard glanced at the woman, his expression neutral but firm. "Ma'am," he said, addressing her directly now, "I am going to have to ask you to not interfere with other guests unless there is a legitimate concern." The woman's face turned red. It was clear she wanted to argue, but she had no ground to stand on anymore. So instead, she simply forced a stiff smile, nodded quickly, and turned away, walking toward the lounge chairs as if nothing had happened. The moment she was gone, the girl let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She glanced up at her mother, who looked down at her with a softness that was only reserved for her. "Are you all right?" the governor asked quietly. The girl nodded. Yeah. Her mother studied her for a moment longer before sighing. You should not have to deal with things like this, she said, more to herself than anyone else. But I do, the girl said, her voice even. We both do. Her mother's expression tightened for a second before she nodded again, her jaw set. Not today, she said. Not here. The girl nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. Around them, the energy at the pool slowly started to return to normal. People went back to their conversations, their books, their games, but the air still carried an unspoken weight, a lingering awareness of what had just happened. The governor reached out and brushed a stray curl away from her daughter's forehead. Enjoy your swim, she said gently. I will be right over there if you need me. The girl smiled, feeling an odd mix of emotions, relief, frustration, but also something deeper, something that told her that this was not the last time something like this would happen. She nodded before slipping back into the water, pushing off the edge and gliding forward. The coolness surrounded her, washing away some of the tension that had settled in her bones. She focused on the rhythm of her strokes, on the familiar feeling of weightlessness. But even as she swam, she knew one thing for sure. That woman had messed with the wrong person today. As the girl swam through the water, she tried to let the tension slip away. But even with the cool ripples surrounding her, the weight of what had just happened clung to her. She could still hear the woman's voice in her head, the way she had spoken with such certainty, as if she had every right to tell her to leave. And then, just as quickly, the shift. The panic, the regret, the desperate attempt to backtrack once she realized who she had just messed with. The girl pushed herself through the water harder, her strokes becoming stronger. It was not just about this moment. It was about all the moments like it, all the times people assumed things about her before they even knew her. She had grown up seeing it happen to her mother too, watching the way people spoke differently, once they found out who she was, as if power and status were the only things that made someone worthy of respect. As she reached the far end of the UA pool and turned back, she caught a glimpse of her mother. The governor had taken a seat in one of the shaded lounge chairs, her posture as composed as ever, but her eyes were watchful. Even when she appeared relaxed, she was always aware, always ready. The woman who had caused the scene was still sitting a few chairs away, her shoulders stiff, her face tense. She had pulled out her phone, scrolling furiously, occasionally glancing around as if hoping to make sure no one else was still paying attention. But the truth was they were. Even if no one was openly staring, people had noticed. The girl wondered what the woman was thinking now. Was she embarrassed, angry, regretful? Or was she simply frustrated that she had been caught? She dipped beneath the water again, letting the silence of it calm her thoughts. But when she surfaced, she heard something that made her stop mid-stroke. I was just trying to do the right thing, the woman was saying in a hushed voice, speaking into her phone. How was I supposed to know who she was? The girl's stomach tightened. She knew she should not care what the woman thought. She knew she had nothing to prove. But hearing those words still made her blood run hot. She pulled herself onto the dewey pool's edge, water dripping from her skin as she sat there for a moment trying to steady her breathing. She did not want to tell her mother what she had just overheard, not because she was afraid, but because she already knew what her mother would say. Her mother would remind her that people would always reveal who they truly were if you paid close enough attention, that it was not her job to fix their ignorance, but knowing that did not make it any less frustrating. As she sat there, lost in thought, a familiar voice called her name. She turned to see her friend, Jordan, walking toward her, towel draped over his shoulder. You good? He asked, lowering himself onto the chair beside her. He had clearly seen everything that had happened. She sighed, running a hand over her damp curls. Yeah, she said. I guess. Jordan gave her a look, the kind of look that said he did not believe her for a second. You want me to throw her phone? The deep end, he joked, nudging her shoulder lightly. She let out a small laugh. Tempting. Jordan leaned back, stretching his arms behind his head. People are wild, he said, shaking his head. Like, what did she even think was going to happen? She was just going to tell you to leave and then go back to sipping her lemonade? Apparently. Jordan rolled his eyes. Bet she's going to spin it like she was just trying to enforce the rules or some nonsense. She already is, the girl muttered. Jordan frowned. Wait, what? She nodded toward the woman. She's on the phone right now talking about how she was just trying to do the right thing. Jordan exhaled sharply, sitting up straighter. Man, he muttered. People like that never admit they're wrong, they just double down. The girl shrugged. Does not really matter. Jordan side-eyed her. You say that, but I know you're mad. She sighed. Yeah, she admitted. I am. But I also know it is not the first time and it won't be the last. Jordan was quiet for a second before he said, Yeah, but that does not mean it's okay. She nodded. She knew that. But she also knew that her mother had taught her to pick her battles. Still, as she sat there, she could not shake the feeling that this was not over. Not really. Because people like that woman never truly let things go. And something told her that before the day was over, this situation was going to get even messier.